To help you drift off to sleep, here is a highly detailed, intentionally repetitive, and deeply exhaustive exploration about one of historical figure, Napoleon Bonaparte. The narrative is designed to be calm, predictable, and paced for relaxation. Let's dive to the history. The Napoleonic Archive, an administrative audio guide for sleep. Section 1. The Topography and Archive Systems of Corsica 1769. The island of Corsica, situated within the Mediterranean basin, possesses a complex geographical landscape defined by granite formations, coastal plains, and dense maca vegetation. In the year 1769, the administrative recording of births, marriages, and property deeds in the commune of Ajaccio was maintained by local notary officials utilizing heavy, linen ledger books bound in tanned calfskin. These volumes were stored on simple pine shelving units within stone-walled chancery rooms, where the ambient humidity fluctuated according to seasonal coastal winds. Within one of these standard legal registries, an entry was transcribed regarding the birth of Napoleon Bonaparte, recorded under the specific chronological framework of August 15. The ink utilized for this bureaucratic notation was composed of iron sulfate, galls, and gum arabic, a mixture that naturally darkens over several decades into a muted sepia tone. The process of recording such civic data required the clerk to trim a goose quill with a small penknife, dip the tip into an inkwell, and apply uniform pressure across the fibrous surface of the imported paper sheet. Each line was allowed to air dry naturally, though occasionally a fine, pulverized pumice sand was lightly scattered across the wet script to absorb excess moisture before the ledger page was turned. The structural layout of the Bonaparte residence featured standard stone flooring, timber ceiling joists, and a sequence of shuttered windows designed to regulate the intense Mediterranean sunlight. Daily life within this setting moved at a rhythmic, predictable pace, dictated by the arrival of postal packets from the mainland, the cataloging of agricultural yields from the family's small olive groves, and the meticulous sorting of household linens into dark walnut wardrobes. The legal career of Carlo Bonaparte necessitated the continuous drafting of petitions, property boundary descriptions, and inheritance disputes, each document requiring standard legal phrasing, repetitive terminology, and multiple carbon copy drafts, filed systematically within regional magistracy cabinets, educational logbooks, and institutional schedules 1779-1784. Upon his relocation to the mainland of France to attend the military academy at Brienne-le-Château, the young Bonaparte encountered an institutional routine governed strictly by iron bells, grandfather clocks, and printed curriculum timetables. The academy, managed by religious educators, adhered to a rigid daily schedule that commenced promptly at 6 o'clock in the morning during the winter months and 5 o'clock during the summer season. The students were assigned uniform wooden desks arranged in parallel rows within cold, whitewashed classrooms heated by slow-burning ceramic stoves. The study of mathematics formed a significant component of the daily instructional blocks, involving the repetitive calculation of geometric theorems, logarithmic tables, and algebraic equations written out on small slate boards with limestone chalk. The chalk dust would accumulate in the narrow grooves of the wooden frames, requiring regular cleaning with damp wool rags at the conclusion of each instructional period. The curriculum also mandated the parsing of Latin verbs, the copying of ancient historical chronologies, and the precise drawing of geographical maps featuring coastal elevations, river tributaries, and national boundaries. The meals served in the refectory followed an unvarying cycle. Standard portions of boiled beef, rye bread, lentils, and diluted table wine, distributed by silent kitchen staff onto pewter platters that produced a dull clinking sound against the long oak tables. The evening hours were dedicated to silent study periods, during which the only audible sounds were the scratching of dip pens against paper, the occasional rustle of a turning page, and the steady, rhythmic ticking of the hallway clock. The bedding provided in the dormitory consisted of a straw mattress, a linen sheet, and a single wool blanket, tucked tightly into iron bed frames that were inspected daily for alignment and cleanliness by the academy's proctors. The artillery manuals and ballistic tables of Auxonne 1788. As a young lieutenant in the Lafayette artillery regiment stationed at Auxonne, Bonaparte's duties were primarily defined by the study of ordnance manuals, engineering blueprints, and supply inventories. The garrison town was situated in a low-lying river valley characterized by persistent morning fogs and high humidity levels, which required the constant application of grease to iron cannon barrels to prevent oxidation. The daily regimen involved the systematic calculation of ballistic trajectories based on the weight of the projectile, the powder charge volume, and the angle of the mortar elevation. These calculations were derived from thick reference tables compiled by military mathematicians, requiring the user to cross-reference multiple columns of figures printed in dense, small font typography on heavy cream-colored paper. The maintenance of the regiment's supply wagons was a highly repetitive task that required filling out detailed inspection forms regarding the condition of wooden wheel spokes, leather harnesses, iron linchpins, and the health metrics of the draft horses. Bonaparte occupied a small, sparse room containing a simple wooden table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bookcase filled with volumes on fortification design, defensive trenching, and the historical deployment of supply lines. The hours spent reading were illuminated by a single tallow candle, which required periodic trimming with snuffers to prevent the wick from smoking. The sound of the wind through the river reeds outside the garrison walls provided a continuous, low-frequency background hum, occasionally punctuated by the distant, rhythmic footfalls of the night sentries changing guard at the ammunition depots. The processing of regimental paperwork, the filing of clothing requisitions, and the checking of dry powder inventory levels created a predictable, insulated environment where individual days blended into a seamless continuum of administrative maintenance. Bureaucratic procedures in the Topographic Bureau 1795. During his tenure at the Topographic Bureau of the Committee of Public Safety in Paris, Napoleon operated within a dense network of bureaucratic desks, map registries, and filing systems. The office was responsible for synthesizing geographical data sent from various military fronts, translating field sketches into standardized tactical maps, and drafting long-form operational directives for the armies. The room was filled with large drafting tables covered in specialized paper, rulers, compasses, and bottles of colored ink used to denote topographical elevations, marshlands, and road networks. The work required a high degree of clerical precision. A single error in calculating the distance between 2 supply depots could disrupt the bread rations for thousands of infantrymen. Napoleon spent his days examining ledger books detailing the availability of leather boots, the condition of regional grain mills, and the exact head count of horses available for transport duties. The atmosphere within the bureau was quiet, defined by the low murmur of clerks, verifying column totals and the steady rustling of large format maps being unrolled and weighed down at the corners with smooth lead weights. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling pigeonholes, each labeled with geographical coordinates and regional names, containing rolled documents tied with coarse twine. The administrative requests arrived via courier couched in highly formalized, revolutionary rhetoric, yet the core tasks remained stubbornly transactional, verifying numbers, approving requisitions for wheel grease, and cataloging the physical wear and tear of the state's transport infrastructure. The logistics of the Italian supply trains 1796. The campaign in Italy is often studied for its movement, but its daily reality was defined by the profound logistical challenge of moving thousands of supply wagons over poorly maintained mountain passes. Upon taking command of the Army of Italy, Napoleon inherited an administrative apparatus that was severely underfunded and disorganized. The primary tasks of the headquarters clerks involved the continuous drafting of letters to local contractors regarding the delivery of wheat flour, forage for mules, and salt pork. The ledger books from this period demonstrate a meticulous tracking of resources. Each entry recorded the number of sacks delivered, their weight in kilograms, the moisture content of the grain, and the name of the wagon master responsible for transport. The movement of the army depended entirely on the physical durability of the leather shoes worn by the infantry, which were prone to rapid degradation on the gravel roads of the Apennines. The paperwork generated by the medical officers was similarly vast, consisting of daily admissions lists for the field hospitals, inventories of clean bandages, and requisitions for bark extracts used to treat standard camp fevers. Napoleon sat for hours at makeshift writing desks inside rural villas, signing hundreds of mundane authorizations for the establishment of local bread ovens, the repair of broken axles, and the distribution of fractional pay to various regiments. The background noise of this administrative hub was the constant grinding of iron-rimmed wheels on stone roads outside, the snorting of tired pack animals, and the repetitive, methodical sorting of official correspondence. by a team of exhausted military secretaries. Administrative records of the Egyptian Institute 1798. The expedition to Egypt included a significant contingent of civil engineers, surveyors, mathematicians, and naturalists who formed the Institute of Egypt in Cairo. The primary objective of this body was not military conquest, but the comprehensive scientific cataloging of the region's topography, agriculture, climate, and ancient structures. The daily proceedings of the Institute were conducted with formal academic rigor, involving the reading of lengthy papers on the salinity of the Nile water, the mechanical efficiency of traditional irrigation wheels, and the chemical composition of mineral deposits found in the desert sands. The scholars maintained detailed journals in which they recorded hourly temperature fluctuations, barometric pressure readings, and wind directions using brass instruments imported from Paris. The physical workspace of the Institute was a converted palace, where large rooms were repurposed into laboratories, libraries, and drafting studios. Clerks and illustrators spent countless hours tracing the exact dimensions of stone hieroglyphs, measuring the base perimeters of ruined monuments with long chains, and pressing dried botanical specimens between sheets of heavy blotting paper. The administrative oversight of this enterprise required Napoleon to review and sign off on budgets for ink procurement, paper conservation, and the distribution of all lamps for evening research blocks. The air within the study rooms was warm and dry, filled with the faint scent of old parchment, chemical reagents, and the dust stirred up by the steady movement of scholars, organizing their scientific findings into multi-volume taxonomies. The legislative drafting of the Civil Code 1800-1804, the compilation of the French Civil Code, required years of highly structured legal debate, committee meetings, and the systematic reconciliation of regional, customary laws with statutory frameworks. Napoleon participated in numerous sessions of the Council of State, which were held in the high-ceilinged chambers of the Tuileries Palace. The meetings followed a strict protocol. A legal section would be read aloud by a rapporteur, followed by a methodical, clause-by-clause analysis by the assembled jurists. The discussions centered on complex legal definitions regarding property ownership, inheritance structures, marriage contracts, and the exact wording of notary protocols. The secretaries recorded these debates in shorthand, later transcribing them into formal minutes using a uniform cursive script on heavy paper, bearing official watermarks. The legal texts were subject to endless revisions. Commas were shifted to clarify liability. Archaic terminology was replaced with precise administrative prose, and cross-references were verified against historical Roman law precedents. The physical environment of these sessions was characterized by the smell of floor wax, the soft scraping of leather chairs on parquetry, and the occasional clearing of throats before a jurist offered an interpretation of a specific article. The resulting legal code was a masterwork of bureaucratic systematization, compressed into hundreds of ordered articles that regulated the minutiae of daily civic life across the territory, from the legal width of a drainage ditch to the precise distribution of an estate among surviving heirs. The standardized architecture of the Consular Postal Network 1802, the stability of the consular government relied upon the rapid and reliable transmission of state papers, decrees, and reports via a highly organized network of postal relays. The poste aux chevaux was governed by a dense book of regulations that specified the exact distance between relay stations, the number of horses to be maintained at each outpost, and the fixed fees for couriers based on the weight of the mail pouch. Each post house along the major highways featured a standard layout: a stable for 15 to 20 horses, a blacksmith's forge for shoeing and wheel repair, and a small office where the postmaster kept the logbooks. The logbooks required the systematic notation of every courier's arrival time, departure time, the number of horses exchanged, and the physical condition of the leather mail bags. The courier's route was timed down to the minute, with penalties applied to postmasters who failed to have fresh horses saddled and waiting upon the sounding of the courier's horn. The infrastructure required constant maintenance: the purchasing of oats by the bushel, the clearing of mud from the station courtyards, and the regular oiling of leather saddles and bridles to keep them pliable in freezing weather. Napoleon reviewed weekly summaries of the postal network's efficiency, noting the average transit times between Paris and distant administrative centers like Bordeaux or Strasbourg, ensuring that the paper flow of the state remained unhindered by mechanical or human delay. the imperial court etiquette, and wardrobe ledgers 1804. With the establishment of the empire, the informal structures of the consulate were replaced by a highly codified system of court etiquette, dress protocols, and ceremonial hierarchies. The grand, modern-day ceremonies compiled a massive manual that dictated the exact placement, attire, and behavior of every individual attending the imperial court. The wardrobe ledgers from this period contain exhaustive lists of fabrics, dimensions, and embroidery costs for ceremonial robes, uniforms, and liveries. Each official rank was assigned a specific color palette, an embroidery pattern, measured precisely in millimeters of silver or gold thread per centimeter of cloth. The preparation for a court function involved a vast network of tailors, lace makers, and jewelers working under strict state contracts that detailed delivery dates and quality standards. The court functions themselves were exercises in disciplined geometry. Participants were required to stand in designated rows based on precedence, move at a measured pace, and observe absolute silence during the reading of imperial decrees. The rooms of the palace were maintained at a uniform standard of cleanliness, with teams of servants polishing gilt furniture, replacing exhausted wax candles in crystal chandeliers, and dusting the long silk draperies that insulated the large windows. Napoleon's personal routine was equally systematized, managed by valets who timed his dressing, his baths, and his brief meals down to the minute, turning the daily existence of the ruler into a highly predictable, repetitive performance. The bureaucratic organization of the Grand Army 1805. The internal structure of the Grand Army was managed by the Ministry of War Administration, an immense bureaucratic entity that translated strategic plans into endless columns of figures and supply requisitions. The army was divided into army corps, each possessing its own administrative staff responsible for tracking headcount, ammunition supplies, and rations. The daily report, or situation defectives, was the foundational document of this system. Every regiment was required to submit a precise count of officers, non-commissioned officers, and privates present for duty, sick in hospital, detached on escort duty, or missing. These forms were printed with standardized grids, requiring the company clerks to fill in each cell with black ink, under the dim light of camp lanterns. The distribution of rations was a mathematical exercise based on fixed allowances. A standard daily ration consisted of 750 grams of biscuit or bread, 250 grams of meat, 30 grams of rice or dried vegetables, and a fractional measure of vinegar and brandy. The procurement of these items required the establishment of supply depots along the line of march, each managed by a commissary officer, who kept strict accounts of every barrel of flour received, inspected, and issued to the units. The endless tracking of these material assets ensured that the army functioned as a massive, predictable machine, where the physical energy of the soldiers was sustained by a continuous, calculated influx of basic commodities. The Continental System and Customs Inspections 1806. The implementation of the Continental System required the creation of an expansive, maritime and land-based customs bureaucracy designed to prevent the entry of British manufactured goods and colonial commodities into the European continent. The Downs Imperialis expanded to employ thousands of customs inspectors, clerks, and coastal guards stationed at ports, river crossings, and border checkpoints from Hamburg to Trieste. The daily routine of a customs inspector involved the physical boarding of merchant vessels, the breaking of cargo seals, and the meticulous verification of shipping manifests against the actual contents of the hold. Every crate of sugar, bale of cotton, and barrel of tobacco was weighed, catalogued, and inspected for counterfeit origin marks. The paperwork generated by this process was immense, requiring multiple copies of customs clearances, tax receipts, and seizure reports to be sent to the Central Ministry in Paris. In cases where contraband was discovered, the goods were systematically listed in a condemnation registry, moved to secure state warehouses under armed guard, and eventually destroyed or sold at public auction according to strict legal protocols. The quiet monotony of the customs houses was defined by the scratch of pens, the weighing of heavy iron scales, the stamping of wax seals on cargo certificates, and the dull murmur of merchants waiting in line to have their transport permits validated by quiet, unhurried officials. Administrative supervision of the Imperial Universities 1808. In 1808, Napoleon established the Imperial University, a centralized, bureaucratic structure tasked with organizing and supervising all levels of education across the empire. The entire system was governed by a Grand Master and a university council based in Paris, which dictated curriculum choices, textbook selections, and teacher qualifications down to the smallest detail. The state regulations specified the exact hours of instruction, the dress code for professors, who wore specific robes with colored sashes, indicating their faculty, and the precise wording of student discipline reports. Every secondary school, or lycée, operated under a military-style discipline, with lessons announced by drum rolls and students organized into uniform companies. The central office received annual reports from regional inspectors who evaluated the cleanliness of school, dormitories, the financial ledger balances of individual academies, and the orthodoxy of the lessons taught in history and mathematics classes. The paperwork involved in tracking the employment records, pension contributions, and promotions of thousands of educators required an extensive filing system housed in the ministry buildings. The administrative rhythm of this educational apparatus was steady and unvarying, ensuring that every student across the vast territories of the empire was reading the same passage of Caesar or solving the same algebraic equation at the exact same hour of the instructional day. Road and Canal Infrastructure Inventories 1810. The expansion of the empire's infrastructure required the continuous oversight of the Corps des Ponts et Chaussées, the state engineering department responsible for the design, construction, and maintenance of roads, bridges, and canals. The department maintained a comprehensive inventory of all public highways, classified into routes imperiales of the first, second, and third class based on their width, paving materials, and strategic utility. Engineering inspectors traveled these routes regularly, filling out detailed assessment sheets regarding the depth of ruts, the structural integrity of stone bridge arches, and the silting levels of canal locks. The documentation from this period features highly detailed technical drawings of retaining walls, drainage culverts, and towing paths, executed with drafting ink on linen-backed paper. The financing of these projects required the careful tracking of toll revenues, labor contracts, and procurement costs for crushed gravel, granite blocks, and timber pilings. Napoleon spent long hours reviewing these engineering summaries, checking the progress of the Simplon Pass Road or the canal linking the Rhine to the Rhine, noting the cubic meters of earth moved and the expenditures allocated for stonecutter wages. The bureaucratic management of these physical assets proceeded with a methodical rhythm, transforming the diverse topography of Europe into an ordered, ledger-bound network of reliable transport routes. The archival repositories of the Empire 1812. As the empire expanded its administrative reach, Napoleon initiated the centralization of Europe's historic state archives in Paris, seeking to create a singular, comprehensive repository of legal, diplomatic, and historical documents. Tons of parchment volumes, treaties, papal bulls, and land registries were packed into sturdy wooden crates, loaded onto heavy transport wagons, and carted across Europe from Rome, Vienna, Simancas, and Brussels. The processing of these incoming collections required a massive effort by archivists, paleographers, and filing clerks working within the designated repository spaces. Each document had to be carefully dusted, unrolled or unfolded, assessed for conservation needs, cataloged within a master classification system, and assigned a specific shelf mark. The workspaces were quiet and cool, designed to preserve the delicate organic components of old paper, animal parchment, and wax seals. The archivists compiled multi-volume index books, written in an elegant, uniform script, cross-referencing thousands of historical legal privileges, treaty clauses, and genealogical records. The environment was defined by the dry scent of centuries-old ink, the muted light filtering through high, north-facing windows, and the rhythmic, repetitive sound of archivists turning thick ledger pages as they quietly mapped out the bureaucratic memory of the continent. The bureaucratic routine of Longwood House 1815-1821. During his final years of exile on the remote island of St. Helena, Napoleon's existence was confined within the small, wind-swept estate of Longwood House, where the immense administrative energy of his past was compressed into a highly repetitive, daily domestic routine. The British governor maintained a strict set of security regulations that dictated the boundaries of Napoleon's movements, the timing of his postal communications, and the financial allowances for the household expenses. Within these constraints, the small contingent of French companions and servants established their own internal court etiquette, treating the simple wooden rooms of the house with the same formal protocol previously observed at the Tuileries. The daily schedule was unvarying. Napoleon spent the morning hours dictating his memoirs to his secretaries, who sat at small tables covered in loose sheets of paper, writing down his words in rapid shorthand before producing clean, long-form copies in the afternoon. The lunches and dinners were served on surviving pieces of the imperial silver service, with the servants dressed in green livery coats that grew increasingly faded over the years. The afternoon hours were occupied by quiet reading in the library, short walks within the fenced garden paths, or the meticulous recording of the daily weather conditions, the persistent southeasterly trade winds, the driving mist, and the damp humidity levels that caused the wallpaper to peel away from the stone walls. This enclosed, predictable environment continued month after month, with the passage of time marked only by the arrival of the monthly supply ship, the slow growth of the garden vegetables, and the steady, quiet transcription of history onto endless sheets of cream-colored paper. If you happen to still be awake, your mind is undoubtedly still actively engaged. Additionally, if you find yourself thinking a great deal, there is no problem in continuing with the next series of videos, designed to provide comfort, relaxation, and transport you to a state of deep healing sleep. These videos are ideal for relieving insomnia, helping you take much-needed rest, and ultimately, washing away stress from your mind. Furthermore, as a supportive reminder, let's not forget that taking care of our overall health plays a crucial role in our daily lives. Please feel free to share any feelings or comments you may have right now in the comments section. Sometimes just sharing our emotions and experiences within our family and close circles can create a sense of mutual support and comfort. Remember, don't hesitate to share any reasons behind your stress with individuals you trust and feel comfortable with, such as friends or family members. Let's continue to stay in touch and maintain open communication as a team. Lastly, we appreciate your understanding and support in this challenging time. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us whenever you need it. Thank you for being part of our community and for all you do to make a positive difference.